I started renting a small cabin in the woods for a couple months in 2023 when my relationship with my father escalated, and I decided to move out. The actual tenant of the house, as I found out later, left suddenly for unknown reasons, and I'll call him the landlord for convenience. The house was a detached two-story structure with a small kitchen, living room, and one bedroom on the upper floor. Leading up to the bedroom was a narrow stairway with a trapdoor that closed off the room from above. The place was secluded, standing on the edge of the forest, which seemed perfect for temporary shelter to me. It had been a month since I had lived in this cabin. I had already paid my second month's rent and had fully settled in. The house stood at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by several similarly abandoned-looking structures. One of the houses was clearly empty. I never saw any lights or cars there. I didn't know the neighbors either, though sometimes at night I noticed lights in the far windows, which seemed odd. I didn't work in the neighborhood, but I had to take long shifts, 12 hours at a time, and would come home late at night, absolutely exhausted. On days like that, I would just eat something quick and fall into bed with the TV on to calm myself down. One night, after a long shift, I came home, made myself a sandwich, and went to my bedroom. As always, I closed the trapdoor in the floor so I wouldn't feel vulnerable, but the thought of the trapdoor not locking always alarmed me. There was something strange about this house, but I tried to ignore the resulting unease. As I lay in bed and began to fall asleep to the monotonous buzzing of the TV, I heard something. It was a voice. It was a muffled voice, as if coming from far away.
Who's up there?
I felt paralyzed. My heart froze. It was a voice. But from where? It sounded like someone was right inside the house, but perhaps it could have been from outside. The sounds in this house were always strange. Footsteps, quiet rustles that I wrote off as branches or animals outside. I abruptly turned off the TV, forcing the room into an oppressive silence. I quietly walked over to the window, looking out. It was dark, with only the faint light of the moon shining through the trees, but I couldn't see anything.
Who's there?
I shouted, but the answer was absolute silence, piercing and frightening. My gaze slowly moved to the hatch. Fear gripped me. What if someone was down there? I lifted the hatch and, with trembling hands, peered down the stairs. Suddenly, I noticed a shadow flickering in the darkness at the foot of the stairs. A moment, and it was gone. I grabbed my flashlight and went downstairs. I was so scared that I could feel my heart racing. Turning on the light in the living room, I looked around the house. Everything was in its place. But as I headed for the window, I heard something again. A muffled whisper, as if someone was near the door. Suddenly, the lights in the house flickered, and for a moment, everything was dark. I went back to the bedroom and closed the hatch again, but this time I couldn't sleep. A few minutes later, the silence was broken by a loud bang from downstairs, just below the hatch. It was a hard, furious pounding, like someone was trying to kick the door open. My heart sank. I realized that someone was in the house. The sound was unbearably real. There was no doubt about it. Someone had gotten inside. I felt a cold sweat on my forehead and realized I couldn't move. My pulse pounded in my temples. I forced myself up, but when I reached for my phone, it wasn't on the bedside table. My phone was downstairs. I realized that if I tried to go downstairs, this someone could be there, waiting for me. Too scared to stay where I was, I quietly opened the hatch and looked down. The faint light from the TV barely illuminated the stairs. And then I saw it. A shadow flitted across the room. My fear turned to panic, and I rushed downstairs, running out the back door into the darkness. Barefoot on the prickly ground, I ran to the neighbor's house. When I got to the neighbor's house, I knocked on the door and a man appeared in the window, but his eyes were strange, dead, as if he hadn't seen me. I shouted to him that there was someone in my house, but he remained silent, continuing to stare at me. I felt creeped out by his emotionless stare and stepped back, sensing that something was seriously wrong here. When I returned to the house, I found that the back door was closed just as I had left it. I turned on all the lights, looked in every room, but found no one. But the scariest part came later. When I went back upstairs to the bedroom, there was a man sitting on the bed. He was sitting with his back to me and looking at the TV that was on. I felt my fear reach its limit. He slowly turned his head in my direction, and his face was contorted with something inhuman, as if stretched into a horrible grimace. I screamed, and without waiting for his reaction, I rushed away, jumping out into the street. I got into my car and called the police. While waiting for the police, I saw a shadow flicker in the backyard. Someone had crossed the yard and disappeared into the woods. When the police arrived, they searched the house but found no one. One of the officers suggested I spend the night somewhere else. I, abandoning my pride, went back to my father's house. The next day, I packed the rest of my belongings and left the house. The landlord did not hesitate to give me back some of the money, which only increased my suspicions. I can't get rid of the thought that it's all somehow connected. That strange neighbor, the landlord who left suddenly, and the man who sat in my bedroom.